About 15 years ago, I went and saw a play at the Barter Theater in Abingdon, Virginia called A Walk in the Woods. And it was based on an actual event, yet it was also fiction at the same time. Walk in the Woods, I believe it took place during the Cold War, and there were two men who were arms negotiators, I guess it would be, diplomats of a certain way, who would meet over the course of a year to discuss, Russia versus America, and the nuclear threat and things like that. And what they would do is that, the two superpowers, the biggest enemies, would meet and they would disappear into the woods. And the play was written on what this person thought they were talking about over a course of a year as they would meet and go into the woods and have everybody nervous. What could they talk about? Now, that's what issue 5 of Planetary, reminds me of, with our big Doc Brass there, our Dark Doc Savage pulp hero archetype, if you will, where this whole issue is actually slowing down, looking back at the 5 issues that we've had before, seeing where everybody's head is at. And by no means is Dark Brass and Elijah Snow enemies, yet the trust that they form and the friendship they form unfolds through this book very elegantly. I'll give Warren Ellis some credit here, with his writing, because not only do we see an elegant story of what should basically be two guys talking, but we get a lot of information and we see where everybody's head is at. Okay. Now, again, as a book that's the archaeology of, being an archaeologist of the, fantastic and impossible and everything like that, what it does is that it kind of revisits all the way back to issue 1, where we saw our pulp heroes, the heroes that were there before the comic book heroes with comic book history and stuff. And we get a taste of why the pulps were so damn good. I've got a few Doc Savage novels that a buddy of mine sent me, and I finally got to read one and stuff, and it was fantastic and stuff. And Warren Ellis caught the feel of this very, very good. Now, quick review. In issue 1, in 1945, the pulp heroes all met in a mountain because they had an invention that opened up the snowflake. The snowflake is like, the doorway into the bleed that leads to multiverses and stuff, and the multiverse. And they were attacked from another dimension by archetypes of the Justice League. Go back and watch the very first review to see what's going on. And with his legs broken, and as the last survivor of that fight, more or less, Doc Brass sat in this mountain, never sleeping. The perfect man never slept. He stayed guard the whole time with nothing but a pistol for over 50 years. When Planetary found him, and he's been recuperating over the last 4 issues, and he's still recuperating here. Okay, and we saw him cameo in issue 4, where the Hark Foundation had one of their buildings blasted. Go watch that review also. And this reveals there's a bit more to the Hark Foundation than we were led to believe. Now, this book is actually the one where you'll probably end up reading it 2 or 3 times, because not so much because it's that good, but because of how this information subtly is very subtle that comes through there that progresses the story. Um, you know, Things are revealed. I mentioned the Century Babies. It turns out that Doc Brass and Elijah Snow were both born January 1st of 1900. They also prop up Jenny Sparks of the Authority, formerly Stormwatch. She's also a Century Baby. They're all kind of tied together. What this issue also does is that Warren Ellis, this is supposed to be part of the Wildstorm universe that was started by Jim Lee and bought up by DC by this time. But basically, you can ignore that because Warren Ellis did what he wanted with the books that he wrote. He made his own little Ellis verse here. And so we're starting to realize that Planetary is in this universe. Okay, Jenny Sparks is there, Authority is there, and it was also kind of foreshadowing that we're going to have a crossover, which didn't know at the time and stuff, right? Um, and that's basically the gist of it. Things like that are coming out. Elijah Snow is actually hoping to get a little bit more information from Doc Brass about Planetary. Um, he just doesn't trust it. And for some reason, he touches Doc Brass, and Doc Brass kind of wakes him up. You're asking, Doc Brass says, "I've been in a mountain for 50 years. You know, this may not be a good idea. Elijah Snow's just been, you get the idea that he's searching for camaraderie, he's searching for a friend, and these two end up having a bond and a trust form over the talks and remembering things. How many people have lived, 100 years, that you can talk to about things, and they reminisce about the past, and that's where John Cassidy and Warren Ellis yet again have just done amazing things. As they remember, as they talk, and Doc Brass talks about things, we get to see pieces of their adventure in this prose style that's going on. They're remembering things. In this we get to read, a pulp book, excerpts from it. And names are dropped. Like I said, Jenny Sparks. We know where they're at now in this Ellis verse of his storm watching, the Authority books. You don't need to go back and read those. This stands on its own. But he's giving you just enough information that if these characters were to pop up, you know what was going on. We learned about other, the secret history of this world. John Cumberland, who came as quick as he went, and a lot of people, don't even know he existed and stuff. Very Superman-like, okay? And there's probably more to read in him, that stuff. And Doc Brass remembers him as a friend, sitting there. Just fantastic art with these pencils amongst all them stuff. Fighting the spider creatures. And of course, we're still in the very early eras of what influenced comic books and the genres that were there. The science and magic of the 40s, the gumshoe feel, the cinematic feel of the movies and things like that. And John Cassidy's style is just amazing, man. I see, you see his art getting better and improving, and the storytelling is just getting fantastic. I believe they're still on it. And then it gets revealed that, you can tie things from the last 4 issues that were before this. There we have, we find out, we see that name Hark, Anna Hark. Now we're getting into it, like, oh, the Hark building, it makes you question, did they build the building, that building that was vectorized in issue 4, that had the, I don't, you go back and watch the review, but there was something hidden under the building. Did they do it on purpose? Just great exposition, great art. Then we learn more about those pulp heroes that came and went so quick in issue 1. A little bit about their adventures, who they were, and you start figuring out who they're influenced by. In our world of pulp heroes, who these archetypes and stuff. Just fantastic. I love these panels and pages that he's doing. Just right out of there. See them in action. And that's what I'm saying. This is just such a cool read, man. I mean, it's just more like I'd rather just show you what's here and what's happened, and you get more of the stories and the background. Just fantastic. And the whole time, they end up on a hillside looking down at the woods. Thus the influence, the idea of making me think back to the walk in the woods and stuff. They're sitting on the hillside, 2 guys shooting the breeze. What does all this mean? The secret, all of Elijah's concerns are coming out. And even though he doesn't trust Planetary or the people he's working with, he ends up forming a bond and feeling like Doc Brass is somebody that he can trust. And then he notices the biggest difference. You start getting the idea of Elijah Snow has not just spent the last century hanging out, in the desert where they found him and stuff. He was up to things, doing things, because Doc Brass said it was such a good time having the camaraderie of all of these pulp heroes. I don't know how he refers to them and stuff. He said, you should have been with us, Elijah. You should have been with us. And all he says is, I was busy. So again, moving the story forward, moving the plot along, getting a taste of what the pulps were, and you can now see how they influenced comics and things like that. Just a nice little celebration. Expanding on issue 1, which was needed. Slowing down the story so we can see where we're at, and at the same time, here's where it's going to go. Here's what Elijah wants to do. Just a really great story. One that I enjoyed. And you saw why. Okay. Not very deep into detail. Not me really trying to put a lot of comic book history in it and pulling it from it. Really an issue where the tone of it is just mesmerizing is the word I would give, because you are really lost in what's going on in this issue. Alright? Okay, next issue will be number 6. What could it be? What's our next genre? What does Warren Ellis and John Cassidy have for us? not quite a cliffhanger, but the way this book's been all over the place in a good way, kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? So pop back in here and watch my review of issue 6.